2,300. That is not the attendance count at a concert, and it is not the size of a street protest. That is how many people walked together for 3 straight days across Argentina in the middle of August. They were not there for a hike, and they were not there to protest against anyone. They were there to pray, and to do it, they covered 100 kilometers on foot. But that number is not actually the point of this story. As striking as it is, the real story is what happened once they arrived. And to understand it properly, the best place to start is at the very end, at the threshold of a basilica, and then work backward to how it all began. Before we get into it, if you've been following our coverage of everything happening around traditional Catholic communities this year, from the SPX consecrations to the liturgical disputes playing out diocese by diocese across the world, you already know this channel doesn't miss these stories. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you catch every part of what's coming. And if you want to go deeper, our channel membership gets you extended breakdowns and early access before anyone else sees them. The link is right in the description. Now let's get into it, because this one is remarkable. Hype the video if you think it's informative, it keeps us motivated to work forward. On Sunday, August 17th, after 3 days of walking and 100 kilometers behind them, the pilgrimage arrived at the Basilica of Our Lady of Luján, Argentina's national shrine. No one stopped them at the door, no one turned them away. They walked inside, and within the basilica, Eucharistic adoration and the rosary took place. But the actual reason they had walked for 3 days was not celebrated there. The Mass in the traditional form could not be said inside that basilica. The exact phrase comes from the pilgrimage's own organizer, and it's quoted here without any change. Today it's not allowed. The Archbishop of Mercedes Luján does not permit the traditional Mass to be prayed inside the basilica. This is not a decision made this year, and that is the first thing almost everyone gets wrong when this story circulates. That policy dates back 2 years. In the same interview, the organizer explained exactly how long this arrangement has actually been in place. This is why, for 3 years, a field mass has been celebrated during the pilgrimage. So we are not looking at some newly introduced restriction. We are looking at the 4th consecutive year in which Mass has been celebrated outdoors, under the open sky, rather than inside the shrine the pilgrims were actually walking toward. Which brings us to the question that opens up everything else in this story. If that door has been closed for 4 years running, why did more people show up this year than ever before? This is not a rhetorical question, and to answer it, we have to go back 3 days, to the moment the convoys actually set out. We set off on August 15th, the Solemnity of the Assumption, from the Church of the Immaculate Conception in Roldán, in the province of Buenos Aires. This year's chosen motto comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 19, verse 27, Christ's own words from the cross. Behold your mother. This is not an easy journey. It covers 100 kilometers of rural roads, passing through small villages, spread across 3 days in the Argentine August, which sits in the heart of the country's winter. Mass is celebrated daily in the traditional form of the Roman Rite, on altars set up outdoors directly along the route. Nothing else is missing either. Rosaries, meditations, confessions, Eucharistic adoration, all conducted in an atmosphere the organizers themselves describe as penitential. The explicitly stated model behind all of this is the French pilgrimage from Paris to Chartres. This channel has already covered in earlier episodes, the same one that fills the roads of France every year with 20-year-olds carrying banners and walking for days. Among the priests present this year were Father Raúl Olazábal, of the Institute of Christ the King's Sovereign Priest, and Father Augustin Marie Albrigot, prior of the Fraternity of Saint Vincent Ferrer of Chemeray. This is not simply a mass of individuals walking in the same general direction, and that is the second thing that gets consistently misunderstood when people look at aerial photographs of the crowd. The pilgrimage is organized in chapters, groups of at least 7 people, each with a designated leader who serves as the direct link between the organizers and the pilgrims themselves. Every chapter is dedicated to a specific Marian title or a patron saint, and each one grows out of a group that already existed beforehand, a circle of friends, a family, a college group, a Bible study. The organizers' own words on this point are precise and worth quoting directly. It is not a mass of people walking toward Lujan. They are all groups, Christian cells. The stated idea behind this structure is that once the pilgrimage ends, these same groups return home and keep functioning as those same cells wherever they actually live day to day. And that leads naturally to the next question. If it is not a protest, if it is not a party, and if there is no formal congregation or religious order actually running the whole thing, what exactly is it? There is no political program behind it, and the organizers themselves are the first to say so plainly. There is no religious congregation behind this, and there is no political group either. The 3 stated pillars are summarized in an easily remembered phrase, which also functions as something closer to a cry for the faith itself: sacrifice, prayer, sacraments. Still, it remains genuinely unclear why the Mass ended up being pushed out into an open field at all, unless you go back to 2021 and a specific document that changed the underlying rules for everyone. That year, Pope Francis published the motu proprio that brought celebration of the pre-reform Missal back under the direct control of individual dioceses and bishops. From that point forward, whether the ancient Mass could be celebrated in any specific location depended entirely on the local bishop, and the answers have varied enormously from diocese to diocese. This is not this channel's own characterization. It is the organizer's own stated words. Unfortunately, Pope Francis's motu proprio has made things much more restrictive. In some places it's allowed, in others it isn't. It depends entirely on the bishop. What remains genuinely worth asking then is who actually made this specific decision in Lujan and on what basis it was made. Because personal preference is one thing, the formal application of church law is a different thing entirely, and the two can look identical from the outside while resting on very different foundations. In Lujan, the answer to the pilgrims' request was no, and it was not for lack of trying on the organizers' part. According to the organizers themselves, they met twice, in person, with the Archbishop directly. Regarding the Mass itself, they obtained nothing. What they did obtain was permission for Eucharistic adoration inside the sanctuary. And this needs to be stated clearly, because it is true and it matters for understanding the full picture honestly. No one actually excluded these pilgrims from the basilica itself. The distinction is subtle, but it is also the entire crux of the story. They could enter, they could pray. Their Mass, specifically, had to remain outside. And for 2,300 people who had just walked 100 kilometers over 3 days in the dead of the Argentine winter, that particular distinction is the difference between actually arriving and merely showing up. This pilgrimage did not start out large, and nobody involved in its founding planned for it to eventually become what it is today. It began in 2010 with a small handful of people, and it received no coverage whatsoever in the press at the time. This year, the pilgrimage reached its 17th consecutive edition, and the number of participants exceeded even 2025's total, setting an outright record for the event's entire history. That detail is not a minor footnote. It means the growth curve is rising steadily, in the exact same fourth consecutive year during which Mass has been categorically barred from being celebrated inside the sanctuary the entire pilgrimage exists to reach. No one from the Archdiocese or from any other official church body has offered a public explanation for why participation keeps climbing precisely during this specific stretch of years. But the numbers exist, and the organization itself published them openly, which means anyone can verify the trend independently rather than simply taking this channel's word for it. Not everyone reads this specific trend the same way, and the alternative interpretation deserves to be presented here in full, because it carries genuine and serious weight of its own. The 2021 Motu Proprio explicitly entrusts individual diocesan bishops with regulating exactly these kinds of celebrations, and a national shrine, precisely because of its prominence and its symbolic weight for the entire country, is arguably the single place where that specific regulatory responsibility carries the most institutional gravity, not the least. It is also worth stating plainly that this is not, in any meaningful sense, an absolute ban on the traditional Mass connected to this pilgrimage. Mass in the ancient form is celebrated every single day along the entire route, without interruption, and Eucharistic adoration inside the basilica itself has been explicitly and repeatedly granted. Those defending the Archbishop's position would argue this represents a genuine and good faith accommodation, not outright hostility, a middle path that respects both the governing document Rome itself issued in 2021 and the sincere devotion of the pilgrims making this specific journey. Those on the other side of this specific disagreement respond that a Mass permitted everywhere except the one destination the entire pilgrimage was actually organized around is, in a very real and practical sense, a concession that quietly empties itself of its own substance. The pilgrims did not walk 100 kilometers over 3 days simply to arrive at a building and pray privately inside it. They walked specifically to celebrate the Eucharistic sacrifice, in the traditional form, at the destination that gives the entire pilgrimage its name and its purpose, exactly as the Chartres pilgrims in France do every single year when they arrive at that cathedral's own doors. A field Mass held along the route, however reverently celebrated and however faithfully attended, is not, in this reading, a genuine substitute for the specific liturgical culmination the pilgrimage was actually designed to reach. It is worth placing this specific Argentine story alongside the broader pattern this channel has already documented extensively across an entire year of coverage on precisely this same underlying question, because the shape of what happened in Luján is strikingly familiar. This channel has already traced, diocese by diocese and country by country, the exact same structural tension playing out again and again since Traditionis Custodes shifted regulatory authority over the ancient Mass down to the level of the individual local bishop. In Pittsburgh, a permission was simply allowed to lapse, closing the only diocesan-connected traditional Mass in that entire city. In San Angelo, Texas, a bishop opened an entirely new monthly traditional Mass, explicitly citing the salvation of souls as his stated justification. In Munich, the Archdiocese's own canon law office issued a courteous but entirely definitive refusal to any request for a return to the pre-2021 framework. In Aberdeen, Scotland, a bishop facing a genuine local schism responded not by further restricting the ancient Mass, but by expanding it dramatically within his own diocese, as a deliberate pastoral strategy. And now in Luján, Argentina, a national shrine permits adoration and the rosary, but withholds the one specific liturgical act, the Mass itself, that the pilgrimage was actually organized around from its very beginning back in 2010. What all of these cases share, examined honestly and side by side rather than in isolation, is that none of them involves an outright universal ban, and none of them involves any bishop, in any of these specific and separately documented cases, straightforwardly violating the actual text of Traditionis Custodes as written. Each individual decision, whether restrictive or expansive, sits within the discretionary space that document itself explicitly grants to the local ordinary. And that is precisely what makes this recurring pattern so genuinely revealing about the current and unresolved state of the wider Church's own relationship to her ancient liturgy. The same governing law, applied by different bishops acting in good faith and within their own legitimate authority, is producing radically different lived experiences for ordinary Catholics, depending entirely on which specific diocese, or in this case, which specific national shrine, they happen to find themselves attached to. The organizers of the Luján pilgrimage themselves seem keenly aware of this exact tension, and their own stated response to it deserves real attention because it is neither confrontational nor resigned. They do not describe what happened as a personal grievance against this particular archbishop. They do not frame their annual field mass as an act of defiance or protest against ecclesiastical authority. They describe it, instead, in the same patient and structurally organized language that defines everything else about how this pilgrimage actually operates, through chapters, through Christian cells, through sacrifice, prayer, and the sacraments, treating the outdoor Mass not as a diminished substitute forced upon them, but as simply one more penitential dimension of a journey whose entire character has always been built around hardship, willingly embraced, rather than comfort, expected as a rite. And that specific framing connects directly to the closing reflection the organizers themselves offered, when asked, plainly, why they keep doing this year after year, in the depths of the Argentine winter, walking 100 kilometers on foot toward a door that, for 4 consecutive years running, has opened only halfway. They do not reach for language of controversy, and they do not reach for language of vindication or grievance either. Instead, they quote Pope Leo X directly. There was a time when the philosophy of the gospel governed states. And then they add their own closing line, entirely their own words, rather than any pope's. That, they say, is Christianity. 3 days a year, they explain, you can actually breathe that air. 100 kilometers of dirt road, walked specifically to breathe it in fully, and then, at the very end of that long and deliberately difficult journey, a door that ultimately opens only halfway. Whether that half-open door represents a genuine and defensible act of pastoral prudence on the part of the Archbishop of Mercedes Luján, exercising exactly the kind of discretionary authority Traditionis Custodes explicitly grants him, or whether it represents the same broader pattern of quiet institutional friction this channel has now documented across 4 continents and more than a dozen separate dioceses this year, is a question this specific pilgrimage does not resolve on its own, any more than Pittsburgh resolved it, or Munich, or San Angelo, or Aberdeen. What the numbers from Luján do make unmistakably clear, however, and what deserves to be stated plainly as this story closes, is this. Whatever discouragement a closed sanctuary door might reasonably be expected to produce in the hearts of people who have just walked 100 kilometers to reach it, that discouragement has not, at least so far, translated into declining participation. The opposite has happened instead. More people walked this year than in any of the pilgrimage's previous 16 editions combined. In the very same year, the door remained exactly as closed as it had been for the 3 years immediately before it. If this story resonated with you the way it resonated with us putting it together, do us a real favor and hit that like button, because it genuinely helps this reporting reach more Catholics who are watching this same pattern unfold in their own countries and their own dioceses, and wondering if anyone else is actually connecting the dots. If you're not subscribed yet, now is exactly the time. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you don't miss where this story goes next. Because as we've shown you today, this is not an isolated Argentine story. It is one more chapter in something considerably larger, playing out across the entire Catholic world right now. And if you want the deepest possible coverage of every one of these developing stories, extended cuts, and access before anyone else sees them, our channel membership is linked right below this video, and joining directly helps us keep doing exactly this kind of careful, honest, source-by-source reporting for you every single week. Thank you all so much for watching and for walking through every one of these stories with us. What do you think? Should national shrines make exceptions for pilgrimages like this one, or is the current approach the right balance? Let me know in the comments below. Amen. God bless you.